I'm here talking to progressive candidate Caney Arnold, who is running for City Council of Los Angeles. Hi, Caney. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem. Caney, can you please tell us what office you're running for and why you decided to run?
I'm running for LA City Council, District 15, and the district comprises of San Pedro, Wilmington, Harbor City, Harbor Gateway, and Watts. And the reason I decided to run is I was retired and then I started helping with homelessness. And I saw how frustrating it was to work with the city to try to get people off the street. And that's what got me interested in starting. And then as I started my campaign, I learned more and more about the corruption and pay to play politics that goes on in city government. And that just inspired me more and more.
You said that you were a Democrat and then I guess you dem exited during, like after the election. Is that what it was? You were Democrat, a Green, and now you're running as a Democrat again. So can you tell me a little bit about why you've decided to be a Democrat again?
Yeah, I was a big Bernie supporter. And then having gone through the primaries, I saw some of the things the Democratic DNC was doing. In some of the primaries, especially in New York, I would call out there and people would think their polls were open, the usual 7 in the morning, and had no idea that the poll times had actually changed to noon. That was primarily in Bernie strongholds, and then just some other things that were frustrating during the primary. And so I decided to exit for a while, went with the Green Party, and really enjoyed being with other progressives, but I found out that um, they don't have the power, they don't have the resources yet, or the backing to be able to get a candidate the resources they need to actually get into office. Or that was my assessment at the time. So I looked back at the Democratic Party, and people were basically begging me to come back, so I did.
What are some of the core issues that your voter base is concerned with, and how do you plan to address them if you're elected?
Homelessness is a major issue here, especially down in San Pedro and Wilmington. Um, the main approach that the city has been using, and especially our councilperson's been advocating, has been an ordinance that it's called here 56.11, and it's an ordinance that the city uses to basically push people out of encampments and as a way to be able to confiscate their property if they don't have it moved within 24 to 96 hours. So that approach doesn't really do much. All it does is push them from one place to another and then another. And so you can see how that's not effective. What most cities do that is effective is they get people into temporary housing and then eventually into what's called the housing first concept, where you get people off the street. They're no longer desperate. They can deal with any mental issues or substance abuse issues that they might have. And at least a third to a half of people that are homeless do have that. And they didn't before they were homeless. They definitely do when they are homeless, as you can imagine. So getting them those services and some job training, and in most cities, you see about an 80% success rate where people get back on their feet. They're able to hold down an apartment with their job, and things are good again. And it seems like that's a much better approach than the pushing around approach that has been leaving desperate people on the streets. So that's probably my number one area. Another area is development down at our port and our waterfront. It's been almost exclusively industrial, and it's invaded our coastal area that is legally, according to the California Coastal Commission, supposed to be devoted only to recreation and commercial. And the city has been violating that as well, and so we need to fix that also.
So you're a legislative liaison. Can you explain what that role consists of and how that might inform your leadership skills?
Yeah, as far as our neighborhood councils, yes, I'm the legislative liaison for Harbor City's neighborhood council. And I largely got that because on my own, even before I joined the council, I was one of the policy wonks who would actually go into the website and read the council files and see what the council was doing and read all those boring motions and look at the agendas and the minutes. And um, there's a lot that's buried in there that is public. And I guess the city council would say they are being transparent because it is available. But unless you have a lot of free time, it's not that easy to go digging through all that. And um, so the fact that I've been able to do that, and then I pull a lot of that information out to report at the council meetings so that our neighborhood is aware of what's going on. I think that's helped me get a good handle on what's going on with the city, see some of the ways things kind of get snuck in here and there. And then just overall has given me a better appreciation for how hard it is to find things out and how we need to do a better job of communicating with constituents to push that out in newsletters every week, town hall meetings when we can, any way we can to make it easier for people to get the information rather than make them have to sort through arduous files to get it.
That seems really fair. So your major concern, well, one of your major concerns seems to be to get people involved in legislation.
Right. I've always felt that um, if we're going to have democracy and if people are going to be part of that, they have to be. I mean, it's the basics of democracy. If you're going to be a citizen, you need to know what's going on, and if government's going to work for you, you need to know what's going on, and government needs to listen to the people. Unfortunately, our government, our elected officials tend to be happy with the electorate not knowing things, and then they can do things on their own. So it's really up to people to do some of the effort. But if some of us can make it a little bit easier for everybody, it sure would help everybody a lot.
I definitely agree with that. I would like to talk a little bit about your policy positions. Would it be correct to say that you consider yourself to be fiscally conservative? And if so, how does that fit with progressivism? For instance, is it compatible with policies, with touchstone progressive policies like single payer health care?
I think it is. And a lot of that fiscal responsibility, I know in a strange way, came out of the way that I grew up. My father grew up in Mississippi. Actually, when he was a child, he was a sharecropper out in the fields, picking cotton, living in a shack with another family. And he was able to get out of that because his family was able to move up a little bit. World War II happened, and then the GI Bill happened, and he was able to go to college and become an engineer and go work at Lockheed Skunk Works. So government has a role in, that's considered an investment, and it is fiscally responsible, I think, to be investing in our people because you get a return on that investment. So that's part of being fiscally responsible. Same as helping the homeless. Some people might look at it as a liberal, bleeding heart, enabling type of thing. But if we're investing in our homeless so that they can get back on their feet and become productive again, that's not just the most empathetic way to do it, it's also fiscally the smart way to do it. So I just try to put the both together, and it to me it makes sense.
So, um, I think that when people hear fiscally conservative, especially progressives, it's kind of a weird, like you wouldn't expect to hear someone call themselves a progressive and also fiscally conservative. So, given that, have you experienced that people kind of feel those things are at odds with one another? Do you get a lot of questions about that?
Right, and I think that's perfectly normal because that's the way life is. Life is a trade-off of priorities. We can either spend our money on lights and food, or we can go out to a concert, or we can buy a fancy car. And um, so it's basically balancing priorities. Now, as far as things like single payer, I mean, to me, that again, that makes sense because now you're spending your money as an investment to make sure that the people are healthy, they stay productive, they can go to their job. You don't have to have them going to expensive ER visits. In the long run, it improves our overall productivity. And it's the compassionate thing to do. Again, somehow compassion and fiscal responsibility fitting together. Who'd have thunk?
I agree that they definitely can. And in fact, one of the things, the biggest thing that I have seen personally that I think would go a long way toward that is the Green Party's Green New Deal. Do you back any sort of strategy like that?
Definitely. I mean, we're not using the horse and buggy anymore. We're using cars. There's always been a transition. Right now, the oil producers and the auto manufacturers have, slowed down that transition. I think the auto manufacturers have finally figured out that, going green is a smart way to go. So I think they're on board, and now the refineries are the next step. And I definitely support things like Elon Musk is doing with the gigabattery um, facility out in Arizona. Um, Solar City. That's where we're going to be getting all the new jobs, is in the green economy. And if we want to be productive, and if we want our people to be able to have good jobs, we need to realize that's where um, the movement is going, and be at the front end of that so that we can take advantage of that.
Can you tell us about any green innovation strategies that you have for your district in LA since you're running for city council?
Well, overall, the 15th district, we're home to every refinery in the city of Los Angeles, San Pedro and Wilmington primarily. So the first green thing to do would be to reduce the emissions from the refineries here as much as possible. Our current council person is on the South Coast AQMD and has consistently backed the refineries in not reducing emissions. And he's also let what is not just an environmental but a safety hazard in Rancho LPG, which is a storage facility up in San Pedro. The Tesoro and other refineries, when they produce gasoline, there's a byproduct called butane, and that butane has to go somewhere, and it gets stored in a tank. And right now, that tank is offsite. It's a massive tank that was built, questionable whether it was even built to 1970 standards. And we know that if we have an earthquake 5.5 or higher, according to the spec, it's not going to withstand that. And if it doesn't withstand it, it's going to have a massive blast of 3 mile radius. And we have other oil refineries within that 3 mile radius is then going to cause a chain reaction, and we could see a very large disaster in San Pedro and Wilmington. And that's not the type of thing that I or a lot of the residents here want to have continuing to hang over us.
Wow. So I think that people in your district, at least progressives, would much rather see somebody taking that seat who has policies that tend toward wanting to get rid of all of that dangerous energy crisis kind of stuff that's going on. So hopefully they'll hear about your campaign and they'll do something about that.